Good evening. For no particular reason, I'm wearing this amazing mask, only because I found it recently at my mum and dad's house and obviously had to bring it home with me and wear it for just such an occasion. Tonight we're celebrating Women's History Month, and I'm going to be looking at great women in fiction and great women who've written fiction. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have any particular books that you'd love to mention that you think are the greatest books ever written by a woman or about a woman. And I will actually remove this mask, even though I love it, because it actually makes reading quite difficult. And I am going to be doing a little bit of reading from books as I go. So I do want to start off by talking to you about witches, because there's been a huge and exciting upsurge in novels, fiction, literature, and non-fiction indeed, about witches. One might even call it witch lit, which has been a term coined in The Guardian recently. There's been some shadowy spell put on popular literature aimed at women. It used to be at one point called chick lit, but now we're moving over into witch lit, perhaps. So this witch lit could be described also as a way of redesigning, reaffirming, re examining what witches are, both in fiction and in history. And there's been a whole exciting slew of novels coming out all about witches. I am going to be talking about other topics as well, but I just thought we'd begin with this exciting new witchy thing, which has been hitting the shelves recently. So there's actually quite a few books on the verge of coming out this year about witches. We've also had um, lots of witchy books recently, one of which was the fabulous The Bewitching by Jill Dawson, which was all about a, an innocent woman who was tried for being a witch. And it was a horrifying, brilliant, highly harrowing read, which I would totally recommend to any of you. But some of the ones that are coming up, we've got Margaret Mayer's The Witching Tide, which is set in East Anglia in 1645, which tells of a mute midwife and healer who becomes silent witness to a witch hunt led by a sinister new arrival in their village. The theme of such a witch hunt is picked up again in Stacey Thomas's book The Revels, which is also coming up this year, which is about a witchfinder general. And furthermore, there's going to be another witchy book coming out in June, which is called Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Tours, with a, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, with a publicity slogan that warns some books should never be opened because it follows a family whose job it is to guard a trove of deadly magic books, keeping them safe from malevolent organizations. And if you open those books, terrible things will happen. So that's Ink Blood Sister Scribe, which is coming up soon this year. Now, I want to find my lovely mask again because there's still lots of people joining, and I don't want to have you losing out on the joy of this fantastic, rather witchy mask. I think while we're talking about witches, I'm going to keep this fabulous mask on because it gets me into the witchy mood. So those are some of the witchy stories that are coming up this year. There's also a rather fantastic one, which I am very excited about, which is The Change by Kristen Miller, which is all about women of a certain age, i.e., menopause, suddenly discovering that they have powers when they hit the menopause. So, this is a very wonderfully empowering book for women of that certain age, menopausal women. The Change by Kirsten Miller, which is set in the Long Island oceanfront community of Matauk, where three different women discover that midlife changes bring a whole new type of empowerment to them. After Nessa's husband dies and her twin daughters leave for college, she's left all alone in a trim white house, not far from the ocean. In the quiet of her late 40s, the former nurse begins to hear voices. It doesn't take long for Nessa to realize that the voices calling out to her belong to the dead, a gift she's inherited from her grandmother, which comes with special responsibilities. Meanwhile, on the cusp of 50, Harriet Osborne, advertising director, has just witnessed the implosion of her lucrative career and her marriage. She hasn't left her house in months, and from the outside it appears as if she and her garden have both gone to seed. But Harriet's life is far from over. In fact, she's undergoing a rather stunning and very welcome metamorphosis. So you get the drift. This is The Change by Kirsten Miller, and it's a book of changes, metamorphosis, and women becoming empowered in their late 40s and 50s. There's another heroine, former executive Jo Levison, who's been at war with her body for 30 years. The free floating rage and hot flashes that arrive with the beginning of menopause feel like the very last straw, until she realizes that she has the ability to channel them and finally comes into her power. Then it becomes something of a thriller just to add to this. So it's a book that could have just been about metamorphosis, change, and power. But actually, the three women discover a teenage girl whose body was abandoned beside a remote beach. And they then decide that they need to discover who was responsible for this death. So that is an exciting book, which is part of the genre that we're calling witch lit. And there is this rather exciting witchy movement going on in the world of publishing, which is taking witches into new directions and exploring what witches might really have been. We've also got some non-fiction books on the same theme. Haggitude by Sharon Blackie, and also Hags by Victoria Smith. So Hags is all about the demonization of the older woman, and that is a very modern, just come out literally this year, book about what it is to be an older woman in modern society. And then we got Haggitude by Sharon Blackie, which is about hags with attitude, so to speak, which was actually published in 2021, which readers describe as mind-blowing, an anthem for all we could be. I sincerely hope every woman who can read has the time and space to read it, says Manda Scott, author of Boudica and A Treachery of Spies. So this book, Haggitude, is a book for any woman over 50 who has ever asked, what now? Who do I want to be? It's a life-changing new book showing how your second half of your life might be your most dynamic yet. Now I'm being distracted by Laughing John. Hello. Saying that I should go out and buy my milk like that. You want me to go to Asda dressed like this? I can tell. Well, only if I'm spreading the joy of Haggitude literature, which is our theme right now of witchy literature. So that's Haggitude by Sharon Blackie and Hags by Victoria Smith. I've been talking about The Change by Kirsten Miller. And then there's also a beautiful book called Weyward by Amelia Hart, which I've got somewhere. Here it is. Which is, look, what a gorgeous cover it is. Which is just out as well. And this is about three different women set over different periods. We've got Kate in 2019, who is fleeing London, abandoning everything to go and live in Cumbria. We've got Violet in 1942, who's more interested in collecting insects and climbing trees than in becoming a proper young lady, until a chain of shocking events changes her life forever. And then we got Altha in 1619, who's on trial for witchcraft, accused of killing a local man. Known for her uncanny connection with nature and animals, She is a threat that must be eliminated. But wayward women belong to the wild, and they cannot be tamed. So that's Weyward by Amelia Hart, which is another fantastically witchy tale. And I'm just going to read you the first opening couple of pages because it's instantly gripping. It's one of those books that the minute you start, you want to then stay up all night reading. And by the way, there's a little intro bit about the Weyward sisters from Macbeth. The Weyward sisters, hand in hand, posters of the sea and land, thus do go about, thrice to thine, thrice to mine, and thrice again to make up nine. Peace the charms wound up. Macbeth. Weyward is used in the first folio edition of Macbeth. In later versions, Weyward was replaced by Weird. So they're the Weyward sisters, not the Weird sisters, those witches from Macbeth. So we got a little prologue from Alpha in 1619. 10 days, they told me there. 10 days with only the stink of my own flesh for company. Not even a rat graced me with its presence. There was nothing to attract it. They brought me no food, only ale. Footsteps, then the wrench of metal as the bolt was drawn back. The light hurt my eyes. For a moment, the men in the doorway shimmered as if they were not of this world and had come to take me away from it. The prosecutor's men. They had come to take me to trial. So that's the prologue. Then we have chapter 1, Kate, and I'll just read you a tiny bit to get you hooked into this exciting book. Weyward. This is 2019. Kate is staring into the mirror when she hears it, the key scraping at the lock. Her fingers shake as she hurries to fix her makeup, dark threads of mascara spidering into her lower lids. In the yellow light, she watches her pulse jump at her throat, beneath the necklace he gave her for their last anniversary. The chain is silver and thick, cold against her skin. She doesn't wear it during the day, when he's at work. The front door clicks shut. The slap of his shoes on the floorboards. Wine gurgling into a glass. Panic flutters in her like a bird. She takes a deep breath, touches the ribbon of scar on her left arm, smiles one last time into the bathroom mirror. She can't let him see that anything is different, that anything is wrong. Simon leans against the kitchen counter, wineglass in hand. Her blood pounds at the sight. The long dark lines of him in his suit, the cut of his cheekbones, his golden hair. He watches her walk towards him in the dress she knows he likes. Stiff fabric taut across her hips, red, the same colour as her underwear. Lace with little bows, as if Kate herself is something to be unwrapped, to be torn open. She looks for clues. His tie is gone, 3 buttons of his shirt open to reveal fine curls. The whites of his eyes glow pink. He hands her a glass of wine and she catches the alcohol on his breath, sweet and pungent. Perspiration beads her back under her arms. I'm going to stop there. Trust me, if you keep reading, you have to read on. So this is a gripping book, Weyward. It's about 3 different women set over 500 years, and it's a really fantastically great witchy book. Just come out. Then I mentioned earlier The Bewitching by Juno Dawson. I'll just tell you a little bit more about that. So that's about Alice, who's old and sharp-tongued, but she's no fool. She visits her new neighbours, and when one of the daughters accuses her of witchcraft, she has no inkling how rapidly things will escalate. This is a book that's based on the 16th century case of the Witches of Warboys, which was a real case of witches being tried. And of course, they were simply weird women, so to speak, women who knew about nature and probably knew about how to cause spontaneous stillbirth and so on. And it's a novel of searing imagination that vividly conveys the way fear can turn into paranoia, and victims could be made to believe in their own wickedness, especially when those in power hold all the cards. So that's my witchy theme. I'm now going to remove the mask and talk about other books by amazing women, about amazing women, and do send in your thoughts and comments as we go along. If you've got any particular favourite books or favourite novels or favourite books about women or amazing authors that you think should be celebrated, send in a message and let me know. So, these are all in no particular order, but there's a fantastic book from 1929, which not everyone has necessarily heard of, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's called Passing by Nella Larsen, and it's very short. It's only about 150 pages, if that. Absolutely beautifully written. And Nella Larsen was an amazing writer who only published two books, which were Passing and another book called Quicksand. And she was unfortunately unable to publish a third book, despite winning a Guggenheim Prize in order to carry on writing. But she couldn't find a publisher. And so she sank into obscurity and became a nurse. However, her book Passing was recently taken up and brought back into the public eye. And it was made into a rather fantastic black and white film, which I would also thoroughly recommend watching. But read it if you can, because it's an utterly gripping read. And it's about a black woman who passes as if she is a white woman. So she lives in the world of white people with her husband, who also believes that she is actually white. And it's completely gripping, shocking, and eye opening. And one of the strangest things about the book is that the heroine is referred to affectionately as Nig by her husband, because he says that she's getting blacker and blacker and she's becoming more and more of a Nig, in his words. And when this is first said, it's in front of various of her black friends, and they're completely appalled, shocked, stunned, and horrified. But it's an indication of how completely undercover she is, that her own husband believes that she's white, believes that she hasn't got a drop of African blood in her, and he calls her Nig as a term of affection. And it's just a really shocking and brilliant book. And I'm going to read you a little extract of it, because the writing is fantastic, and it does make one mourn deeply the fact that Nella Larsen was not able to publish more books, because she's clearly an absolutely brilliant writer. So this is from the very beginning of the book, Passing by Nella Larsen. It was the last letter in Irene Redfield's little pile of morning mail. After her other ordinary and clearly directed letters, the long envelope of thin Italian paper, with its almost illegible scrawl, seemed out of place and alien. And there was, too, something mysterious and slightly furtive about it. A thin, sly thing which bore no return address to betray the sender. Not that she hadn't immediately known who its sender was, for some 2 years ago she had one very like it in outward appearance, furtive, but yet in some peculiar, determined way, a little flaunting, purple ink, foreign paper of extraordinary size. It had been, Irene noted, postmarked in New York the day before. Her brows came together in a tiny frown. The frown, however, was more from perplexity than from annoyance, though there was in her thoughts an element of both. She was both she was wholly unable to comprehend such an attitude towards danger as she was sure the letter's contents would reveal, and she disliked the idea of opening it and reading it. This, she reflected, was of a piece with all that she knew of Claire Kendry. Stepping always on the edge of danger, always aware, but not drawing back or turning aside, certainly not because of any alarms or feelings of outrage on the part of others. And for a swift moment, Irene Redfield seemed to see a pale, small girl sitting on a ragged blue sofa, sewing pieces of bright red cloth together, while her drunken father, a tall, powerfully built man, raged threateningly up and down the shabby room, bellowing curses and making spasmodic lunges at her, which were not the less frightening, because they were, for the most part, ineffectual. Sometimes he did manage to reach her, but only the fact that the child had edged herself and her poor sewing over to the furthermost corner of the sofa suggested that she was in any way perturbed by this menace to herself and her work. Claire had known well enough that it was unsafe to take a portion of the dollar that was her weekly wage for the doing of many errands for the dressmaker who lived on the top floor of the building, of which Bob Kendry was janitor. But that knowledge had not deterred her. So, in spite of certain unpleasantness and possible danger, she'd taken the money to buy the material for that pathetic little red frock. There had been, even in those days, nothing sacrificial in Claire Kendry's idea of life, no allegiance beyond her own immediate desire. She was selfish and cold and hard, and yet she had too a strange capacity of transforming warmth and passion, verging sometimes almost on theatrical heroics. So that's Passing by Nella Larsen, and it's about Claire Kendry, who is a black woman who has passed as white for the last many years, and she has succeeded so completely that she is married to a man that believes her to be a white woman. And her friend, Irene, is begins to get involved in this charade, and she's horrified and scared and worried. She is a black woman who also is able to pass as white but doesn't actually want to, so she kind of floats between the two worlds very successfully, the worlds of Harlem and the white world, and nobody really questions her, but she's not pretending to be anything, and she's appalled that her friend Claire is passing as a white woman, and she's terrified about what might happen if she ever gets found out, because also Claire does have a child with her husband, and when the child was born she was terrified that the child would be extremely dark, and she was lucky enough that in her eyes that the child was born white. So it's a book with amazingly deep, complex race issues, as well as having an undercurrent of um, same sex attraction, because the heroine and the woman that's passing as white have a definite electricity running between them. And this adds to the interest and intrigue of the book. And I would definitely say that's part of its amazing power. So do read it. It's short, it's brilliant, it's shocking, and it's a total eye opener. And that is Passing by Nella Larsen. And that's also a book which came to mind when I was talking about The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett not so long ago, which is another book which talks about passing as white. And that's also an absolutely fantastic read. So anyone that hasn't read Passing, get it now. It's short, and it's also a fantastic Audible book. And if you do subscribe to Audible, like me, you get it for free, which is always a bonus. So that's Passing by Nella Larsen. Now, moving on. So many books to talk about, so many amazing authors. It's very difficult to limit it this evening to a handful of amazing women authors. And I'm being a little bit random, jumping around chronologically, but I just want to talk about The First Woman by Jennifer Makumbi, which was published in 2021. This is a Ugandan book by a Ugandan author who now lives in Manchester. And it's a book which is brilliant for women to read in terms of feeling empowered, but also a great book for men to read in order to understand women in greater depth. So it's from the small Ugandan rural village of Natata. That's where it all begins. There's the young Kirebo, who is the heroine, who tells her captivating story. She's 12 years old. The year is 1975. And she is on the prickly path from girlhood to womanhood. She's questioning everything that she sees and hears. And her main question is that she wants to know, where is her mother, who she's never known? And the book is divided into 5 sections, in which, in each of these, Kirebo, the heroine, gets slightly older. And she's brought up by loving grandparents with sporadic visits from her father, Tom, who has an executive corporate life in the bright lights of the capital city, Kampala. And Kirebo discovers that she has an inner rebellious self that flies out of her body in a bid to locate her mother. So Kirebo does have this ability to fly, which is a rather exciting aspect of the book. And it's written about in a very kind of magical realist way. So the flying seems completely believable. It seems like it could be happening in her head, but it also seems vividly real because she actually kind of hurts herself when she's flying. So it's not obviously completely psychic, but it feels very psychic at the same time. Woven within this tale is the Ugandan creation myth of the first woman, Nambi, and Kirebo begins to learn about this folklore from Nsuta, unaware that she's being drawn in for the village witch's own rather ignoble and mysterious reasons. So this woman, Nsuta, is the village witch, and she keeps telling um, Kirebu that she is a witch, and we know that she has strange and worrying powers. This is another book about witches. There's definitely a heavy witchy theme going on this evening. Um, but the author has a great gift of being able to establish scenes and build characters that make you feel as if you know these people and places very much beyond the pages of the book. So it's a very warm story with a lot of love and affection and family feeling in it, but it's set against the chilling backdrop of Idi Amin's brutal dictatorship and war with Tanzania, highlighting some of the harsh realities of being a young adult at such a tumultuous and violent time in Ugandan history. For instance, here's a quote: "The last time Kirubo was at home before Christmas, she'd slept on the roof with Aunt Abby and her next door neighbours, because across the road, the family who lived in the house with a green roof had been massacred." So that's quite a brutal moment. The book is full, actually, of those rather brutal moments where things seem to be normal, happy, and a normal, happy family life is going on, and then suddenly we hear about some terrible brutality um, connected with Idi Amin. So that is a fantastic novel called The First Woman, which I would hugely recommend as a great and eye-opening read. And I then want to go back to Toni Morrison back in 1970. So she's an incredible author that we obviously must mention when we're talking about fantastic women writers and fantastic women in history, because Toni Morrison is single-handedly responsible for changing the face of literature and of bringing Black women's writing to the fore. And she wrote her amazing novel, The Bluest Eye, in 1970, which was a very experimentally written novel. It was highly innovative in the way it was structured. Morrison built a shattered world to complement the experiences of her heroine, Piccola, and her heroine has this fatal desire to have blue eyes when she's a Black girl with brown eyes. And she has been brought up with Western white ideas of beauty, and the whole book is analysing this idea of what beauty is and whose notions of beauty should be listened to. And unfortunately, the heroine of The Bluest Eye has a very jaded view of beauty, that she thinks that she has to be blue-eyed, blonde-haired and fair-skinned in order to be beautiful. So the temporal structure of the book and the frequent shifts in perspective are a key part of Morrison's attempt to imagine a fluid model of subjectivity, which was a model she hoped could offer some kind of resistance to the dominant white culture of the time. So, by shifting the viewpoint at the time within her book, Morrison effectively avoids dehumanizing the black characters who trashed Pecola and contributed towards her collapse. Instead, she emphasizes the systemic nature of the problem, showing the reader how the racial issues of the distant and not so distant past continue to affect her characters in the present, thereby explaining, if not justifying, many of their actions. So that's The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. If that's one you haven't read, do read it. Of course, her book Beloved was her most famous and most successful book. I'm just going to have to strip because it's actually getting quite hot. I started off really cold, and now the heat of the excitement of telling you about all these books is generating a lot of warmth, as are the candles that I'm surrounded by. So, Toni Morrison, amazing writer. Read her if you never have. The Bluest Eye is an amazing book. She does write incredibly beautifully. And if you haven't read Beloved, read that now as well. We must also mention, when talking about amazing women writers, The Colour Purple by Alice Walker, which was published in 1983. And Alice Walker was the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize, which is a pretty incredible feat. And that is what made her a household name. The Colour Purple was also made into a film, but the book is fantastic. It's the classic tale of Celie, a young black girl born into poverty and segregation. It's actually a very harrowing read, but one that everyone must read. She's raped repeatedly by the man that she calls father, and she has two children who she has at a horribly young age, because she's 14 when the book starts, taken away from her. She's separated from her beloved sister, Nettie, and is trapped in an ugly marriage. But then she meets the glamorous Shug Avery, singer and magic maker, a woman who's taken charge of her own destiny. And this is when Celie discovers the power and joy of her own spirit, and the book takes on a new and fabulously positive direction without giving the whole plot away. It is an epistolary novel, and Celie writes letters to God. So, because she doesn't have anyone to share her unhappiness with and all the events that are going on in her life, she writes letters to God, and that's how the book is structured. And it makes it a really fantastic read. The epistolary nature of the book is one of the reasons I feel that it's so successful, so vivid, and so powerful, because we feel as if we're there. I think there's always something really magical about epistolary novels. It makes them much more immediate. Do you agree? Uh, One other one that comes to mind is Where Do You Go, Bernadette? A more modern novel, but one that I love and recommend to people quite frequently, which is written in a series of emails, notes, sticky notes on the fridge door, notes written to a secretary, and so on. And that feels incredibly vivid and alive because of the epistolary nature as well. Uh, and there's quite a lot of young adult brilliant books that are written in that style too. That's a bit of an aside. The epistolary novel. I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams is not an epistolary novel, but it does have aspects of it because it's got text messages in it. And I guess that's a new direction that one could go in this day and age, emails, texts. And that wasn't so much the case when Maria Semple wrote Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Moving on from The Colour Purple, another fantastic novel, which if you haven't read, you should immediately get hold of, is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, who is an Iranian French writer. And this is a graphic novel which she wrote and illustrated. And it is a completely brilliant, awesome, fabulous book. Here, there's just a few examples of the brilliant pictures, which I do think are just fantastic. Have a look at those. They're so well drawn and they're so pleasing in the way that they're laid out. They're so vivid, they're so full of character, and they're so full of expression. So Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, I think it was published sometime like 2005, might be wrong there. And it's very much an autobiographical graphic novel. So the heroine within the novel is called Marjane Satrapi, the same as the author's name. She's an intelligent, spirited and modern girl living with her parents in Iran's capital of Tehran during the eventful period of Iranian history from the late 70s into the early 1980s. In Persepolis, the story of a childhood, Margie's remembers her life during those years, mostly from when she was about 10 to age 14. And this account includes how Margie and her family lived through and were affected by the events that included the overthrow of the autocratic Shah of Iran by the Islamic Revolution, the oppressive fundamentalist regime that replaced the Shah, and the devastating Iran-Iraq war. So there's a huge amount of very heavy political events going on around our heroine. And I do find it particularly interesting and gripping because I was there in Iran at that time myself, though admittedly only until maybe it's 1974 that we left, not 100% sure, but we were there until the Shah was deposed, and that's when we left because my dad was a British diplomat in Tehran. So Persepolis illustrates the events that were going on at that highly turbulent time for Iran. And the Western-backed government of the Shah was pushed out in 1979. The revolution ushered in a new Islamic regime that brought massive societal changes, impacting on how people were supposed to behave, including Margie, our heroine, and her family. Margie struggles to adjust to the changes at her liberal French bilingual school, which becomes increasingly stricter. Girls were required to wear veils, and female and male students were now separated. Margie's wealthy and modern parents, her father Ebi and her mother Taji, took part in massive protests against the new regime's strict rules on behaviour, just as they had previously protested against the Shah's regime. Margie's parents worry in the story when a photo of Margie's mother at a protest appears in the newspaper magazines. And later on in the book, the parents decide that the only safe course of action is to send their daughter to England, and that's what happens. So that is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, which is a really fabulous graphic novel. It's also been made into a film, which I haven't seen, I must admit, but by all accounts, it is a brilliant film. And it's a really brilliantly written, groundbreaking book because it brings the stories out of Iran to a global audience. And let's celebrate what an amazing woman this fantastic author is. Not only has she bared her soul and told her story, but she's also written it brilliantly and illustrated it. It's amazing. So that's Marjane Satrapi. Um, Another book that must be mentioned on such a night as this, when we're talking about Women's History Month, Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank. She was an absolutely inspirational, brilliant writer, and we all know the story of why she wrote her book. But every time I pick it up and look at it again, I'm always stunned by how brilliantly she writes and how full of hope she is. And it breaks your heart every time you read it and makes you love her all the more and be all the more happy that she did live and that she did write her story down, but obviously also all the more heartbroken about what happened to her when she died. So, The Diary of Anne Frank, I'm just going to read you a few quotes from her book, and we should definitely be raising a glass to her tonight during Women's History Month, or every night, in fact. She says, "It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them because, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." See, all of these quotes totally break your heart knowing what the Nazis were doing at the time. Think of all the beauty still left around you and be happy. I can shake off everything as I write. My sorrows disappear. My courage is reborn. Anne Frank actually does make you want to write as well. She sings the praises of writing. She's constantly talking about how the act of writing saves her on a daily basis. So, all you writers out there, I know that you'll be encouraged. Pick up Anne Frank's diary at least once a week and be inspired again by her sheer joy in writing. I found that there is always some beauty left in nature, sunshine, freedom, in yourself. These can all help you. Then she's also a feminist, of course. And here's a great paragraph that Anne Frank wrote in The Diary of a Young Girl. Women should be respected as well. Generally speaking, men are held in great esteem in all parts of the world, so why shouldn't women have their share? Soldiers and war heroes are honoured and commemorated. Explorers are granted immortal fame. Martyrs are revered. But how many people look upon women too as soldiers? Women who struggle and suffer pain to ensure the continuation of the human race make much tougher and more courageous soldiers than all those big mouthed freedom fighting heroes put together. That's Anne Frank putting it in a nutshell. Then finally, I'll just leave you with this expression of hers. I don't want to have lived in vain like most people. I want to be useful or bring enjoyment to all people, even those I've never met. I want to go on living even after my death. Uh, Frankly, that candle is for Anne Frank. She's so inspiring, and every time you pick up the book, you want to cry. But she really does inspire you as well and make you appreciate life. And that is her incredible gift and ability. An amazing book that we will also celebrate tonight is Kate Moss's Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries. Unfortunately, I don't have the real book because it's one of those books that when you buy, you immediately want to gift to the next person that you're seeing because it's just a fantastically inspiring book. It's also beautifully produced, looks gorgeous, and is a great gift, but also a great book to have by your bedside because it's a celebration of unheard and underheard women's history. It has 1,000, I believe, women, or nearly 1,000 women, whose names deserve to be better known. And Kate Moss has discovered these unknown women and written about them and brought them to light. By the way, Kate Moss is actually on tour right now, going to many different fabulous venues around the country. If you look up Kate Moss tour, she's bringing her show, Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries, to a theatre near you, and she will share all these stories with you during her show. So if you can catch her, go and see her. I know she's playing at Nottingham. I think she's playing at Southend-on-Sea. I think I might have missed her at Bristol, but she's literally doing these shows as we speak. So do check her out because she's an amazing woman. She's a fantastic performer. She has written many incredible, brilliant, and beautiful books. She also was the person that started the Women's Prize for Literature. We owe a huge amount to Kate Moss. She's a fabulous woman, and she champions other women in her books. So this book uh, gives you the stories of mothers of invention and the trailblazing women at the bar, warrior queens and pirate commanders, the women who dedicated their lives to the natural world or to medicine, women of courage who resisted and fought for what they believed. It's a love song to the unsung heroes of stage, screen, and stadium. It's global, traveling the world, spanning all periods of time, and it's full of intensely moving stories, including a detective story of the author's own family history as Kate Moss pieces together the forgotten life of her great-grandmother, Lily Watson, a famous and highly successful novelist in her day who's all but disappeared from the record. So Kate Moss brilliantly brings in a personal aspect of her life to this book. It's very ambitious in its scope and fascinating in its detail. It's beautifully illustrated, and I'm sorry that I can't show you the illustrations tonight. It's a kind of love letter to her own family history, and also a love letter to all the women who've been forgotten or underrated. There's people like Josephine Cochrane, the American woman who invented the dishwasher, who, after a society dinner party at her home in Chicago, Cochrane was moved to invent the first functional dishwasher. Thank God for her. I think many of us can relate to that. Then, have we got any other examples I can quickly give you? No, I don't think I can. Oh, here we go. So she tells the stories, including from the 13th century Mongolian warrior princess Kutulan to American conservationist Rachel Carson, from Tibetan Buddhist nun and freedom fighter Annie Pachen to the Greek naval commander Laxarina Boubilina, from freedom rider Paulie Murray to Josephine Cochrane, inventor of the dishwasher I've just mentioned, from Chinese feminist poet Ding Ling to the Tasmanian leader Truganini, from the first recorded author in history, N. Duana, to the pioneering 19th century female doctors known as the Edinburgh Seven, from the extraordinary First World War footballing legend Lily Parr to Canadian adventurer and performer Aloha Wonderwell. So that is Kate Moss. Fantastic book. Get hold of that if you can. Then suddenly realising I've got several books to get through and mention before we come to an end. So, one thing that Kate Moss mentioned in her forward to this book and when describing it generally, she has said that although it's true that we've come incredibly far and women are now celebrated, of course, far more than they used to be, she's still conscious that it's always possible that this power and freedom that we have can be taken away from us at any moment, quite possibly. And this leads me to Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale, which somewhere I have to hand, but maybe I put it down in a strange place. Anyway, Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. You know the book, you know the story. there can't be too many of you out there who haven't either read it or watched the series. Um, so it's a shocking, harrowing, brilliant, and terrifying novel, which is eternally relevant. There is that awfulness of freedom being taken away from women, which we're very lucky here to feel is long in the past. But there are still women in the world who are unable to express themselves and whose fertility is taken control of by men, and whose dress and clothing is also not in their own hands. So Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is always an incredibly salutary read. And Margaret Atwood, what an incredible woman. Such a fantastic body of work that she's written. And she's still going. She's absolutely fantastic. Oryx and Crake is one of my favourite ever novels of all time. And it's also a very eye-opening, shocking, brilliant book, which is a bit of a call to arms. She's had a huge effect on the rest of the world of writing, and one of the people that she's very dramatically and closely affected is Naomi Alderman, who wrote The Power, and she was mentored by Margaret Atwood when she was writing that book. If anyone here hasn't read that yet, you must. It's a fantastic, amazing novel, and it's definitely there in the canon of feminist literature because it takes a totally new idea in a totally new direction. So for people that don't know it, The Power, which I believe is also now a TV series, it's about the idea of women suddenly waking up one day in the middle of a future that we don't know exactly when it is. It's actually quite a complicated book in terms of time. It could be the future, it could be the past. I'm now remembering it because it's been a little while since I read the book, but it is bracketed with this kind of historical perspective that gives it a whole different way of comprehending the story. Anyway, these girls wake up one day with a power, which is an electrical power that they have in the palm of their hands, where they can shoot out electricity, a bit like Spider-Man shooting out webs. They shoot out electricity, and with that power, they can zap anyone that's attacking them. So they can zap men, and if men are, for instance, trying to sexually abuse them, they can zap them and knock them down with this jolt of electricity. So this gives women a whole different way of being because suddenly they have the power. The men no longer have the power, and the women can knock the men down at will. And this gives an absolutely amazing new perspective on the whole of history because this power spreads over the entire world slowly, and women gradually take over, and the balance of power shifts towards them, and they start off being morally good and using their power only for self-defense and for the good of humanity, but then some of them become corrupt and some of them use their power negatively, and in the ways that we've seen men using their physical power. So it's a really brilliantly questioning book that makes you ask questions of what you would do if you had that power and how you would cope and what would the world be like if women were in that state. So that's The Power by Naomi Alderman, an amazing book. I also wanted to mention there's been some absolutely brilliant Caribbean literature by women in the last couple of years, in the last few years coming out. There's a great book, so I'm just going to have to mention them all quite quickly as time is running out. When We Were Birds by Ayanna Lloyd Banwo from Trinidad, which is a really fantastic novel. I believe it's a debut novel, which is about a man called Darwin, who's a down on his luck grave digger, and a woman called Yehidi, who has a power to talk to ghosts. And Yehidi's mother is dying. She's leaving behind a legacy to her daughter Yehidi, the power to talk to the dead. The women of Yehidi's family are human, but also not. They're descended from Corbeau, the black birds that fly east at sunset, taking with them the souls of the dead. So that is When We Were Birds by Ayanna Lloyd Banwo, which is a fantastic read. Also from the Caribbean, River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer, just out this year, which is another amazing book. This one set in 1834, and it's about a woman who's looking for her children. She has 5 children: Mary Grace, Mika, Thomas Augustus, Cherry Jane, and Mercy. And most of those children have been taken away from her because she is a slave. And our heroine goes in search of her children, and she's battered back at every turn by hideous men on the whole. She has to go to the different islands in the Caribbean. She has to cross the sea. She's never crossed the sea before. She's terrified. It's an amazing, brilliant, and fascinating read. Not to mention, of course, another brilliant Caribbean novel, which is Monique Roffey's Mermaid of Black Conch, which came out last year and which is one of my favourite books ever, about a real mermaid who is caught like a fish in 2005, and we discover that she's been swimming around those waters for maybe 1,000 years, and that's an amazing book too. So there's all these fantastic new writers coming out of the Caribbean. Another one who's a poet is Safia Sinclair, who wrote a collection of poems called Cannibals, which collides with and confronts the tempest and post-colonial identity. And the poems in her collection, Cannibal, explore her Jamaican childhood and history, race relations in America, womanhood, otherness, and exile. So that's Cannibals by Safia Sinclair. So many books to mention. I must also quickly mention, before coming to an end, The Gender Games by Juno Dawson, which is subtitled The Problems with Men and Women from Someone Who Has Been Both. And that is a really fantastic read. It's about Juno Dawson's journey from being a non-conforming young boy with no interest in sports to a gay man to a straight woman. And all that is interspersed with her views on gender as a social construct, how it impacted on her life, and her views on feminism in today's world. She writes in a really engaging and very conversational style. She says, "I never consented to being a boy. My body was forced upon me. I was born a baby, and then gender started to teach me what men and women are. So yeah, I personified gender and made him some scary presence that lurks under every child's bed. But actually, if you think about it, gender is no more corporeal than a bogeyman. It's an abstract concept. If gender isn't a real solid thing we can reach out and touch, then why shouldn't we be able to change it? All of us." So that is The Gender Games by Juno Dawson, which is another great read. I wanted to also mention The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes, which is another fantastic book which celebrates the pack horse librarians in Kentucky. And if you haven't read this, it's a really good read. And it's a fascinating historical novel about these women who set forth on their horses to bring books to people that would not normally be able to read. Highly recommended, and thanks to Jojo Moyes for bringing us that story. She's a great novelist who has done many a salon with Damien, and I first met her at a reading weekend in Scotland when she was just about to publish Me Before You, which was incredibly exciting. I've been having some conversation with Jane Keat, sorry if I got that wrong, on Instagram, who's been sending me some of her favourite recent reads and the reads that came to mind when I put this out to the world, great women's literature. She said The Hours by Michael Cunningham was the book that first came to mind, which is all about three women who are highly affected by Virginia Woolf and her fiction. Then also she mentioned Karen Blixen and her book Out of Africa, which she's really enjoying. And I remember reading that book and absolutely loving it. She also mentioned Betsy White, who is a Scottish author, who's a Scottish traveller. And she, Jane Keat, who is one of our listeners who sent in these suggestions, she was given these books because I think she grew up in Scotland. And the memoirs of Betsy White are called The Yellow on the Broom, I do believe. Sorry, apologies, Jane, if I'm getting this wrong. But Betsy White, her autobiography, is all about a Scottish traveller, and it sounds like it's a pretty amazing read, which I haven't yet discovered myself. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. Anyone that has any other thoughts of amazing books that they'd like to mention by women or about women, please do send in your thoughts. I'll just go back to wearing my mask for this last moment of the session. It's been lovely being with you here this evening. And sorry, I was meant to do this session last week, but I had a horrible bug and was ill in bed. So that's why it's tonight instead. I will be seeing you again here in a month's time. Do watch this space and also Damien Barr's Literary Salon Facebook page for information. I believe that there's going to be an announcement about the next live salon tomorrow. So watch all your socials for that as well. And by the way, I'm doing an event next Thursday night, so a week tomorrow, at the London Library with Natalie Haynes, which is Under the Covers, when I'm going to be talking to Natalie Haynes all about her reading, what she loves to read, what books are the books that made her the person that she is now. And I'm going to be prescribing her some books as well. So you can come to that live. Look up events at the London Library. That's next Thursday evening. I believe it's 7 till 8:30 p.m. And there's now not a train strike then, so it's easier to get there. And keep coming along to my bibliotherapy sessions every Wednesday night on my Facebook and Instagram pages as well. And I will see you all here back at Damien Barr's Literary Salon in a month's time. So good night. Lovely to see you all. Have a great evening. And do send me any of your favourite women's literature if you haven't already done so. See you soon. Good night.